My name's Randall Nagy. Welcome to Advanced Java 7 Programming. In this course, we're going to be offering an intensive hands-on approach that will allow us to extend our Java way of doing business outside of the Java area proper and into the file system, the internet, testing programs, databases, and other places where most professional software developers quickly find they need to go. As such, we're going to put together an additional requirement set on our previous example that will allow us to follow the training and move it into a more graphical as well as testable way of doing business. We'll also present an evolving set of requirements, once again applied to our base training that we completed in the previous training, and allow it to reach out into areas like file streams, persistence, and serialization, and moving into thread management, multiple process, and even external tools that eventually climax in us using a graphical user interface over our console-based application. As such, we are going to be creating, managing Java processes and threads, as well as using JUnit and writing test cases using other technologies. Certainly, annotations will be something we will revisit again in this training. Handling test cases allow us to understand more how we would do the complete create, retrieve, update, and delete operations, or CRUD, as we've also discussed in previous modules. Using JDBC will eventually consume the web services and performing the networking tasks that we will have to make our application worth something and looking different, although we're using a core elsewhere. As a result of taking this course, you will be able to use Java file and Java level persistence. You will be able to utilize streams and serialization, and you're also managing process via threads and other inter-process communication mechanisms with Java. We will be able to create a graphical user interface using swings, dialogues, frames, and supporting classes, and we also be able to create testable classes, JUnit test cases, and other JUnit features such as insertions. Ultimately, we will be able to have a custom failure message presentation that will allow us to do regression tests or make sure that the features we have put together and tested successfully previously still work as we remember them each and every time we add a new feature. The idea of using SQL or SQL to allow database is also something that we have often the need for in the professional Java world. Ultimately, using the Java network to support web services and other data from the internet and other places coming into our application is something that every professional software developer should be interested in learning. So we're going to see how we actually extend the Introduction to Java 7 and Object-Oriented Programming, or OOP, that we have previously assumed has been taken for this course. Not only will completing the calculator and other examples be important from a conceptual point of view, but also the tools and technologies in addition to the classes and applications that we have covered in those modules is a strong prerequisite here. Also, we assume that you have taken the Introduction to Programming for Non-Programmers, once again, to cover the basics of how we would use the operating system as well as basic concepts to allow Java and Java training to go smoothly for the new-time student. Keep in mind as we go through this training that Java is a trademark of Oracle Corporation. Moreover, a lot of the tools and technology and integrated development environments, for example, will require that we have accepted as well as used and downloaded the proper versions from the sources indicated in the laboratory exercises and in the modules as we discuss them. So the module topics include, obviously, files and persistence. We will also talk about streams and serializations. We will use Java support for processing and threads specifically, and we'll get into the idea of how we can use threading to actually allow inter-process communications, not only between our own classes, but within other applications, for example, console programs communicating to our graphical and non-graphical Java applications. We'll also be using threads and synchronization to manage the things that can actually have to be shared between processes and threads, and ultimately the graphical user interface, which itself has many opportunities for thread support to keep the user experience running smoothly, will be considered. Finally, we will get into a little bit more advanced GUI topics, things that we can use in any IDE without having a designer, and things that most Java software developers will want to learn to code by hand, at least initially. Finally, we will get into things like layout managers, JDialog, parent classes, and the GUI relationships that allow our graphical applications to reuse the venerable swing and other graphical components Java offers the graphical developer. Continuing on with our module topics, we're going to review testing terms and concepts. We're going to have obviously our introduction to JUnit, followed by applying JUnit without using any wizards, although many wizards are available that will allow us to automatically test, for example, the public interfaces to our classes and more. Introduction to database will obviously include introductions to things like SQL or SQL and JDBC or Java Database Connectivity, and the JDBC standard will also have to be covered so that we understand the abstraction that allows us to move from one database technology to another with minimal, not necessarily no, ripple effect to the way we do business in our code. By way of a bonus, I find most people find networking to be a very rewarding and excellent concept to discover, as we learn that standard Java has a way of curating as we discover that Java standards allow standard networking at the URL and URI level so that we can actually grab and communicate to endpoints such as those on web pages and even other applications that run throughout the internet as well as on our local networking clouds. We'll wrap up our appreciation of how we can use networking by discussing web services. We'll talk about all the popular trends and technologies, which will include WSDL, SOAP, REST, as well as the Business Enterprise State Transfer, or BEST technology, featured on sites such as soft9000.com. The curriculum path we assume that every software developer has used before taking this training includes, of course, the fundamentals of operating systems, followed by introduction to programming for non-programmers, as well as introduction to Java 7 and object-oriented programming. These are very hard requirements simply because the example, for example, in Java 7 and object-oriented programming will be moved into and built upon in this training, as we will take that specific set of tools and technologies and classes and add value to them throughout this training. Of course, we are at Advanced Java 7 Programming, and if you're looking for advanced programming, I think you'll agree you've come to the right place. The materials required to adequately work on this training will of course include the usual set of the student guide, followed by the exercise guide, which will have both our exercises and activities in them, as well as the lab files, which will include starter files as well as solutions that can be readily imported into the Eclipse IDE. So let's get started.